rid of that window.
Well, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to have you with us again from the top of Australia to where I am on the southern tip of Australia, across to our friends in New Zealand. I notice we've got one or two from England. It's just wonderful to have you with us once again on our Southern Cross Alliance for Israel December meeting 2023. We weren't originally planning to do a meeting, but because of we're now entering week 9 of the Israel at war, we decided not just to focus on that, but to focus on Hanukkah and what it means in these times. And I'm pleased to have and invite our good friend Rabbi Riesenberg to share, explain, and maybe even light a candle. Over to you, Rabbi.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Welcome to everybody, and happy Hanukkah. And please God, we'll light 6 candles tonight. 6. But certainly, first and foremost, before we begin, we pray for the safe return of those that are held captive by Hamas. We pray for a swift victory of the IDF soldiers, a swift and decisive victory, and they too should all come home safely to their families. It's a beautiful time of year. I think in both our traditions we call it a festival of lights, albeit for slightly different reasons. It's a festival of joy, a festival of gift giving. And I'm reminded of the anecdote that all Jewish festivals have really at their heart one message. They tried to kill us, we won, so let's eat. And certainly Hanukkah is no exception, with a wonderful array of culinary delights, and mainly donuts. I must share with you a personal miracle that occurred with me last night. I set myself a target of eating 1 donut, and by the end of the night I'd eaten 8. But this story briefly of Hanukkah takes us back 2,100 years, to the year 164 before the Common Era. It's 150 years before the birth of Christianity, 2 centuries before the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans. At that time, Judea was under the rule of the Greeks. That was brought about by Alexander the Great. After his passing, he divided his empire amongst his generals, and it was when a certain governor of Judea, who was called Antiochus V, took the throne, that these tensions arose between the Jews and the Greek leadership, because he felt it was his task to disseminate Greek culture and Greek values, and he did that by forbidding certain practices of Judaism. He insulted the Jewish people by putting a statue of Zeus in the temple, and Jews who were caught practicing their religion were tortured to death. Truth be told, there were some Jews, they were called Hellenized Jews, who embraced what he did. But there was a small group of Jews at that time, led by an elderly priest. His name was Matisyahu, and his sons rose in revolt. And it wasn't a one-day game. They fought a brilliant campaign. It went over 3 years. They recaptured Jerusalem. And again, understand, Judea did not have a formal army. It was just a group of dedicated fighters that defeated the world's great superpower at the time. They recaptured Jerusalem. They removed all the sacrilegious objects from the temple and restored Jewish autonomy. Religious freedom was established. The temple was rededicated. They rekindled the menorah with a jar of oil that miraculously lasted 8 days. And therefore the festival was called Hanukkah, which means the rededication. remarkable and extraordinary event. What I've shared with you were events that are relayed in a book called the Book of Maccabees. It's quite interesting. It was a book that was incorporated in the scripture, in the Christian scriptures, but not the Hebrew scriptures. What's interesting is that the rabbis in the Talmud give a different perspective on the festival. And in fact, they ask the question rhetorically, what is Hanukkah? And here they say the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all its oil. Then the royal Hasmonean family was victorious. They searched, they found a single jar of oil that was sealed with the priest above the seal of the high priest, lit the menorah, the candelabra, and a miracle occurred. This one jar of oil lasted 8 days, and the following year, the rabbis established these days of festivity, praise, and thanksgiving. This stark, if not any mention, of the military battle against the Greeks. You see, the rabbis saw a spiritual battle. Judaism was a religion of great truths, of monotheism, sanctification of life, that every human being is created in the image of God, family, Shabbat, values that we have in common. Yet the Greeks were unparalleled at that time in their culture, in their art, in their architecture. Till today, their literature is studied, their philosophies are held in high esteem, and indeed many Jews, particularly the youth, embraced these ideas and discarded Jewish practices. The rabbis foresaw this battle to counter this darkness by lighting 8 small candles. You see, the battlefield was not on the military field. The battle was for the hearts and minds of the youth, the future. And therefore the rabbis called the festival Hanukkah, but they gave it a different interpretation. Hanukkah meaning from the word chinuch, to educate. Our mission is to educate our young people to understand the truth and beauty of their religion. And I think we as Jews have always understood that battles are not necessarily fought on the physical battlefield, but the battle is really to capture the hearts and minds of the future generations. Today, Israel finds itself once more on a battlefield against a despicable enemy that has no regard for human life. And yes, in coming weeks, with God's help, there will be a miracle, a military victory, as was the time at Hanukkah, when a handful of Jews defeated the Greek Empire. Yet there is another battle, and this battle will not end in weeks, nor months and years, and that is a battle for the hearts and minds of people that frankly have been poisoned by lies and distortions and untruths. These lies have been perpetrated to the media with its biased reporting against Israel. These lies are being hailed upon the streets of all great cities and nations around the world by anti-Zionists, anti-Semitic and pro-Palestinian groups. But I think what should disturb us the most, that these lies have been perpetrated on our universities and colleges by the academic elite. And perhaps we saw this in the most stark of terms during a congressional hearing this week in the United States, when a congressman asked the presidents of the great universities of the Western world, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules on bullying and harassment? There was no clear response. Unfortunately, these people have lost their moral compass. And here it is up to us to engage in this battle, to bring the hearts and minds of people back to these great eternal truths that we all believe, that there are things that are morally right and there are things that are wrong. And please God, just as we light, as I'll do in a moment, these small lights of Hanukkah, let us do what we can to bring more light, more goodness into this world by doing good deeds. We take a light which is called the shamash, and we will, I would say, the blessing, which acknowledges the opportunity that we have to light the Hanukkah candles. Baruch Ato Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvoso v'tzivonu lahadlik ner Hanukkah. And we also then acknowledge not only the miracles that God did for us, not only in those days, but the miracles that God continues to do for us. Baruch Ato Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'osa nisim la'avoseinu bayomim hahem bizman hazeh.
No.
Just finish with a beautiful little song called Ma'osu Yeshu Oisi L'chana El Shabeach Tikon Beis Tefilosi V'sham Taidan Ezabeach L'reis Tachin Mabeach Mitzadad Hamabeach Ozeg Moe B'shim Mizmor Chanukah HaMizbeach Ozeg Moe B'shim Mizmor Chanukah HaMizbeach. May these lights illuminate the darkness. John.
Thank you, Rabbi, once again, and welcome to everybody who's joined in the meantime. So, a bit of sunshine here down in Tasmania, which is lovely.
John, I think I've brought some light already. Your whole
You
thing,
brought some light into the life. It's shining.
You are shining.
Well, tonight's a night of surprises, and we have a surprise. I'm hoping that a very good friend of ours is joining us from Canberra to spend a couple of minutes with us. A friend that we have travelled with, worked with, supported, loved, sang with. Are you there, Amir? It would be great if you could unmute and say hello.
Well, yes. Hi, John. Good evening, and very happy to join you once again. While I do recognize that it is possible to have a virtual lighting of the Chanukiah, I'm not that sure that we can have a virtual taste of the donuts, the sufganiyah, that Rabbi Riesenberg had so many of them yesterday, the miracle, as he mentioned. Hanukkah for me, and you heard from Rabbi Riesenberg the story of Hanukkah, why we are and what we are commemorating. For me, it's, of course, about the miracles, but it's also about the Jewish spirit. I think that it's important to recognize that against all odds, the Maccabim, which were down-numbered, managed to defeat a well-organized army, and were able to reoccupy Jerusalem, recapture Jerusalem, and they were also able, of course, to rededicate, purify the Second Temple, and to light the Chanukiah, the menorah, the lamp. But it was really about the spirit. And when I'm thinking about the Maccabim spirit, I cannot not mention at least my personal experience 67 days ago on October the 7th when I was in Israel. It was a shocking day for all of us in Israel, for all of us in the diaspora, and I also know for you, the friends of Israel who are, for so many, many years stood, standing, and forever will be standing behind the state of Israel. But already on October the 8th, I can tell you first-handed what I have experienced in Tel Aviv. It was the Sunday and the Monday. On Tuesday, I was already back in Australia. But on the Sunday and the Monday, the Israelis, despite the differences that you probably read about before the war, between the secular to religious, between the right and left, between the Israeli Arabs and the Israeli Jews, and I can go on, came together and jointly were looking for ways and means to assist the ones that are fighting in the front. And this is the spirit that I believe is so unique for the Israelis, is so unique for the Jewish people. And upon my return to Australia, this is what I experienced and experiencing from the Jewish community. I can say that, and I can share it with you, that the people of Israel were never disunited as we were early this year, but never more united than we are now. And this is something which I do hope will continue and will last after the war. As for the war, I mentioned this is the 67th day. On the eve of the lighting of the first candle of Hanukkah, we mark exactly 2 months since the beginning of the war, since October the 7th. Since then, we managed to regain control of the territories that the Hamas, the 1,500 Hamas terrorists, managed to capture for a temporary period of time. And we are now engaged in excessive military activities in both the northern Gaza as well as in the southern Gaza. The Israeli military and security forces are operating very slowly and very cautiously as part of our collective efforts to mitigate the number of civilian casualties, as well as to narrow the number of casualties on our side. We had a pause of the fighting. Some people in the media use and are still using the term ceasefire. It was not a ceasefire. It was a pause in the fighting, and it was part of the efforts to bring about the release of Israeli hostages. And we managed to bring about during these 7 days the release of over 110 hostages, among them some foreign hostages. And unfortunately, there are still 137 hostages that are kept by the Hamas. And we will do our utmost in order to bring about their release. Since the last time that I had a chance to speak with some of you, we didn't change the objectives of the war. It's still pretty much the same, to depose the Hamas regime, to dismantle its military capabilities, and to bring about the release of the remaining Israeli hostages. We know that some of them are already dead, and we are determined also to bring them back home. Hanukkah is also about the victory of the lights over the darkness. And while we are celebrating Hanukkah, and as I mentioned before, there are still 137 hostages that will not be able to celebrate Hanukkah, will not be able to see the lights. And it's very important to mention them in your sermons, in your prayers. And I do hope that they will be able to see light. It gives me also an opportunity to thank you. to thank you for all your continuous support. And I know that, and it's not just a theoretical support. You're engaged in different projects, different way and means to assist your brothers and sisters in Israel. And this is something that is highly appreciated for me personally. And you know me, I'm a very simple man. It's really moving. It's really moving to see so many of you supporting either financially or morally. Your statements are very important. You're reaching out to the local politicians are also very important. And I encourage you to continue and embrace not just the community, but maybe also sending a virtual hug to the people in Israel, either in the northern border or in the southern border. This is the time that the Israelis, that we are in need for not just a virtual hug, but also a physical hug. And I will share with you, not today, a bit more information about this new project, new idea, new initiative of titled the Virtual Hug. And this is something that I do hope you will be able to join. I can tell you that, as I mentioned before, Hanukkah is known also as the Festival of the Lights. And I cannot share with you how happy I am that I was introduced by our dear friend, Dr. Ron Weisel, to your beautiful community over a year, and it's already a year and a few months ago. In many ways, I can say that you brought lots of light to my life here in Australia, and this is something that I don't take for granted. This is something that I really very thankful for, and I would like to use this opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart. So I wish you a successful Zoom meeting. I know that you have, by the way, Andrew Wallace will be speaking because he's in Israel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you're right, Amir. We were to have him on live, but as things took place, he actually took the advantage of going to Israel to see things firsthand.
He's in Israel along with some other very good friends of Israel, Senator Simon Birmingham, and also Josh Burns and Andrew Wallace and Zoe McKenzie. And tomorrow we will be receiving also a member of parliament, the Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs, Tim Watts. And in a month's time, we will hopefully be also hosting the Foreign Minister, Ms. Wong. I didn't mention, but last week or already 10 days ago, we had here in Australia a delegation of comprised of representatives and relatives of some of the hostages and the victims, mothers that lost their son, mothers that Iris, Yotam's mother, who is still kept by the Hamas, and friends of Noah Gamani, and uncle of Ronnie Eshel that was murdered already on October the 7th. I couldn't be proud more to have them here in Australia, to meet the senior leadership, both here in Canberra, as well as in the states of New South Wales and Victoria, and to tell their story. And when I was talking earlier about the unique Israeli and Jewish spirit, so I couldn't hold myself, and whenever they were telling the story, I was in tears. Everyone was in tears, and they were so strong, so powerful. And this is what I believe is so special about the people of Israel, about the Jewish people, our resilience, our dedication, determination, but also, and it's very important to mention, the love to people, love to our own children. And it was a very, very important visit. And once again, really, thank you very much for having me, and thank you.
Oh, you've been a blessing to us, and we hope we've been a blessing to you. And we know also that, you know, you are hosting people in your home and over the Hanukkah period, which is lovely. Sorry I can't be with you because we're off to New Zealand, but I would have loved to have met and spent some time with your family.
You should know something, John. They come for the food. They come for the food. You're missing the best part. Tal and myself, we love having them, and I'm really looking forward. It's wow, to have them with their spouses here at the residence. It will be wow, the best way to celebrate the lighting of the 8th candle of Hanukkah. Yes,
wonderful. Well, we were in Hobart last night for the lighting of the 5th candle, and singing and dancing in front of Parliament Square, which was a wonderful experience. And I know many others have been just exploring Brisbane, Sydney, other places where similar things have been taking place. So I just thank them all and say, you know, it's just a wonderful privilege that we have. So yeah, I just want to say thank you, Amir. We release you. We know you've got so many things on. So we just say thank you very much indeed. And you are a blessing, and a blessing to you and your family over this period.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. So we have a number of special guests, and again, this wasn't planned. The planning for this particular meeting has been all over the place. We weren't sure what everybody was going to do. We weren't expecting Amir to come on, but he did, and we're just so thankful for that. We have also a special guest from Perth, who is also a rabbi. I think Rabbi Riesenberg stole some of his story about the story of Hanukkah, but we've asked him to come on and speak about something about the Maccabee story that many don't understand. So Steve Lieblich is one of our committee members in Perth. Steve, would you like to introduce Rabbi David for just a minute, and then we'll spend a little time, if Rabbi David's okay, to talk about that particular Maccabee experience.
Thanks, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, got you.
Okay, so Rabbi Freilich, let me start by saying that we in Perth are living in a very special situation, because we have 3 generations of rabbi living with us. We celebrated the 105th birthday of Rabbi Coleman, who was the chief rabbi many, many years ago. His role was taken over by Rabbi Freilich, who is our guest today. And he was the leader of our community for well over 30 years, and retired just a few years ago. Well, I say retired, but he's not really retired, because he's very, very active in the community in other areas. And his role as the chief rabbi of the Perth Hebrew congregation was taken over by a young rabbi from Manchester. So we have 3 generations of rabbi who we can consult here in Perth. Without further ado, let me hand the floor to Rabbi Freilich.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Everybody can hear me?
Yep. Okay.
Firstly, I apologize. I was actually going to give a bit of a background to Hanukkah, but as I turned on, I heard Rabbi Riesenberg, and he's taken much of what I was going to say about the background. One thing I will say, and I'm not sure whether Riesenberg mentioned this, you know, the emphasis by the Jewish people on the story of Hanukkah is more on the lights that were lit after all, when the Jewish people, when the Maccabees went into the temple, and they found just enough oil, pure oil, for one night lighting. So the Talmud says, it was a miracle happened, and it lasted for 8 days. 8 days, and the Talmud emphasizes that part of the story and of the miracle. It does not really emphasize the military aspect of it. And it's only, as Rabbi Riesenberg mentioned, in the book of Maccabees, which is the Apocrypha, which is not really included in the Jewish Bible. It was included in the Catholic Bible and Eastern Christianity, but it was not actually officially in our Bible. But that emphasized the military aspect, the military victory of the Maccabees over the great Hellenistic of the Syrian Greek army, the Hellenistic army. But that, as I said, is not emphasized by the rabbis in the Talmud. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And the reason is because with the Jewish people, military victories aren't the main thing. We don't want to be soldiers. We don't want to have to go out and fight. And therefore, that emphasis was not placed on that particular aspect of it, although it was a great victory. And as you know, even in the wars today in Israel, you never really see any military parades. If, for example, the 6-day war was a great victory. We've had many great victories in battle, but we never celebrate it by showing all our arms and our weapons. How do we celebrate it? We celebrate it the way we do on Hanukkah. And what is that? How do we celebrate the Maccabees? We celebrate it by saying psalms, praising God, thanking God, and also lighting a candle to show, why did we have this victory in the first place? Why did we win this battle? Not for the glory of winning a battle. No, we didn't have to have any battles at all. It was the glory of lighting the candles, which stand for the God's truth, the victory of God's truth over darkness in the world. This was a victory of God's truth over the Hellenization of the world. Now, let me say this. Had the Maccabees not won that battle, there would have been no Christianity. I mean, this was before Jesus' time. There would have been no Christianity. You wouldn't be celebrating Christmas. It's quite interesting because Christmas and Hanukkah, both are on, one's on the 25th of December, and our Hanukkah is on the 25th of the Jewish month of Kislev. In fact, let me tell you that when I was a rabbi in Sydney, I was actually the first Sydney-born rabbi, and when I was in Sydney at a rabbi at Maroubra synagogue, I know some of you could be from Maroubra there, but I was actually at the rabbi Maroubra for some time, and Maroubra was not a very Jewishly populated area, and I was lighting my Hanukkah in the window. And people never see this before, so they go back and say, "That's an interesting Christmas decoration." I said, "No, I happen to be Jewish." I explained that to them. So there is this proximity. It's because of Hanukkah that you have Christmas, because there would have been no Christianity had the Maccabees won. It would have been all Hellenized. So it really was the victory of the Judeo-Christian values in the world, of that which really Hanukkah stands for. So and I think since that time, throughout history, the Jewish people have been fighting to ensure those values. As I told you, it's not something that we don't want to fight. We don't want to be soldiers at all. And that's why the Jewish people do not emphasize that in the Talmud as far as the story of Hanukkah is concerned. They emphasize the spiritual aspect, the spiritual victory, that we were able to light the candles, the candles of the values which we hold dear. Now, I'll tell you something else which is very interesting. I mean, the whole idea of lighting this in the temple, and there was a menorah. By the way, the Hanukkah, which we light on Hanukkah, is a candelabra of eight, whereas the one in the temple was 7. So we actually lit these 7 candles in the temple, 7 candles, every night they were lit, these candles. Now, by the priest. Now, as I told you, there was enough oil for one day, but all lasted for 8 days. Amazing. That was the ness, the miracle of this, the miracle. Now, the thing is, does God need a menorah in his temple? God doesn't need the light. The whole idea of this, the whole idea of having this light, this menorah in the temple, was actually to give us a lesson, give the people a lesson, to show what is our purpose in this world. Our purpose in this world is to make a flame, light the values of truth, of godliness in the dark world. So the whole idea of the menorah in the first place was to espouse our values in the world. And the interesting thing is, the oil that was used by the Maccabees and, of course, in the temple itself, that oil had to be shemen zayzoch, which in Hebrew is translated, it had to be pressed olive oil. Now, why was that? It's all there's a symbolism behind all of this. Whenever I do any of my rituals, I take a lesson from it. That's the whole idea of taking a lesson into my heart, into my soul. And the lesson of that olive oil, which was pressed, there's a Talmudic saying, how do you get the most oil out of the olive? When it's pressed. When it's pressed, the more you press it, the more oil comes out. And that oil actually causes the candle to burn. And it says the Jewish people, Israel, the more you're pressured, the more oil will come out, the more light will come out. And I say this to all who have tried to oppress us. At the end, thank God, with God's help, we've managed to rise above our victimhood, rise above that, and indeed continue those values which we as a Jewish people, are obligated as a light to the nations to share with the world. And that is why the menorah, which I'll be lighting later, because we're 3 hours behind you with Eastern States. We're at 5:30 here now, so we've got a long time to go. But when I light it, it has to be lit after dark, in the darkness, so you can see it's light in the darkness. That's our obligation to do that. So again, that's a lesson. It's a symbolic lesson of showing that light. Now, interesting enough, it really is something very special. I'm going to share some Hebrew with you now. This festival is actually teaching us of Nes. Nes in Hebrew means a miracle. Nes is a miracle. And the special prayers are said on this festival, as it is on Purim, one of the other rabbinical festivals, for it's Al Hanissim. We're thanking God for the Nes, for the miracle. Interesting, there's a question asked. Well, many miracles occurred on other festivals, like Passover, when the Jewish people left Egypt. And we saw the 10 plagues, it was a miracle. But no such prayer for a miracle is recited on Passover. And the rabbis asked, why is that? And a beautiful answer is given. On Passover, we did nothing. God caused the plagues. We just sat and watched. We were spectators. And therefore, it was wondrous. It was above nature. When it came to Hanukkah, we actually had to fight. Sadly, we had to fight for our values. But we understand one thing, that when we're fighting, it's not us who eventually has victory. It's us in partnership with God. Now, the word nes, miracle, comes from a word nissa, which means test. So we should understand that if we are victorious and please God in promoting the light, then it's not our victory. It's nothing to do with us. Nissa, it's a test for us to understand that we've done this in partnership with the Almighty. And I think all of us, Jewish, Christian, all of us have the duty in partnership with the Almighty to please God, make the miracle of godliness, of light throughout the world, and that it continues. And as I said, we all have to put our efforts to ensure that. Can I just say also one thing? You know, it's amazing, if I can share it with you. As I said to you, this is off the cuff because Rabbi Riesenberg took most of my speech. So this is all coming right from the heart as it's coming. It's one thing. Another thing I want to share with you, which is very interesting. It's, you know, the menorah itself, and this is a thought that's coming to my soul. You know, the menorah was something beautiful. It was a gold, magnificent. But it represents something. It's something physical. But the menorah is nothing without the candles. I mean, it might be beautiful, might be a beautiful physical ornament, but without the candles burning on top, it really has no meaning. Unfortunately, this is the way of many in the world. People just worry about the physical structures without the light, without the godliness. Hellenism, gone. The Syrian Greek army that the Maccabees fought, gone. Ancient Rome, gone. Because you know why? It was all concentrating on structure. The menorah itself, not the light. Because you need the light, because the light is the thing that actually is eternal. The light is the thing. If there's no light and no godliness, and we don't fight for the godliness, then indeed the structures just disappear. And that, I think, is a profound lesson as well. And what's happening at the moment with the modern Maccabees in Israel, they're also fighting. I'm going to get quite tearful, because they're also the modern Maccabees. And they're fighting at the moment for the values, not only for the Jewish people, for all of us. They're at the front line. You know, there's a saying of many of these people who tried to destroy us all. First the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. We're at the front line. We just have to be the Saturday people. But please God, you know, with determination and with fortitude and the determination to keep godliness, the light and the lights burning, the light of godly truth burning in this world. Please God, in partnership with God, we'll all be victorious. I know we will. Thank you for listening. And thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Amen. You brought me to tears too. Oh, wonderful, Rabbi. Look, I'm just so grateful for your graciousness and for your insight and for your heart. And you are exactly on key. And we're just thankful that you could join us and speak off the cuff as you have. And so I always go, when it comes from your heart, we know. And we are with you, we stand beside you, we link arms with you. And as you say, this is light versus darkness, good versus evil. So we are just part of this battle at this time, and we give thanks for you and for your time.
Well, I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with my fellow human beings an important message. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Wow. So things haven't gone as we had planned for tonight, because we were to have our next guest, Andrew Wallace live. And for those who haven't met Andrew Wallace, Andrew is an MP, a member of the Liberal National Party from the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. And we have been in contact with Andrew Wallace over the last probably 6 weeks. Rabbi Riesenberg, myself, Josh Reinstein from ICEJ, about the need to start a Israel Allies caucus in the Parliament. And many of you would know that one of our other friends, Erica Betts, started a friendship group for Israel in Parliament many years ago and chaired that. And I can't remember who took over from him, but then Andrew has stepped into this place. We were planning to have him on to tell his story tonight, but out of the blue, I don't know how this happens, he was called to go to Israel on a special envoy mission, as our ambassador Amir has alluded to. But the week beforehand, I was lucky enough to have him as a guest on my Sunday afternoon meeting, just to get him to share part of his story. So I'm now going to ask our host, David Jack, part of our committee, if he could play just the 13 minutes, and that will then give us a bit of time for closing and Q&A. If you could do that, please, David.
When I left school in 1985, I was educated by the Lassalle brothers in Mentone in Victoria. And I went in my gap year, I worked as a volunteer for them in setting up a youth crisis centre in Mordialloc in the southeastern suburbs in Victoria. And the following year, I joined a Palatine monastery with a view to become an ordained Catholic missionary. And it didn't take them long to realise that I wasn't made for that sort of a lifestyle. And I got the DCM, the Don't Come Monday. They suggested that I wouldn't be able to fulfil my vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And some 35 years later, I can say that they were absolutely right. So I went back home to my parents' place, and I was quite distressed because I had made a decision in myself to give my life to the service of others through the church, and I felt that's where I was being called. And I was only 19 at the time, so it was pretty hard for a young fella to take that news. Where I lived, in the monastery in which I lived, it was built for 100 students. And at the time that I was going through, I think there were 5 of us. So, I knew they were down on numbers, significantly down on numbers, clearly, but only to sort of get that rejection. I felt that very, very keenly. I felt that very deeply. But my old boss, Walter Sylvester, who was the rector of the monastery, he just said, look, Wally, he used to call me Wally, they still do. There's many ways that you can serve God. You don't have to be a priest to do that. So I then went home, and my backside hadn't hit the kitchen stool, and my mum said, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I don't know. I've got no idea. And she said, well, why don't you do a carpentry apprenticeship? And I gave her every reason under the sun why I couldn't do that. I didn't know anybody, blah, 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 blah. And she just sort of, as mums want to do, she slammed the phone book down in front of me and said, start ringing, because you're not going to be, bludging around here. And she said, your grandfather donated a library of books when he was alive to the master builders in Victoria. Give them a call. And I did. And I had an apprenticeship that afternoon. And that started the journey of a 10-year building career. So I did my apprenticeship in Victoria, started building a subcontract initially. I then moved to Queensland in about 1993 with my wife and our eldest daughter, who was then 12 months old. And I built in Queensland for a number of years. And then I decided to go to university and study law full-time. And that was an interesting experience, but I enjoyed it so much, I stopped working and decided to concentrate on trying to get through my degree as quickly as I could. At that stage, we had 3 children. So my older girls described that as the time in our lives when we were poor. We didn't have 2 shekels to rub together. And went to university. Because I'd worked for myself for 10 years, the best part of 10 years, I felt like I just didn't want to go through the ordinary articles of clerkship with a law firm. So I decided that I would hang my shingle out as a barrister. So I went straight from university to being a barrister. And I practiced as a barrister for 16 years. And then I was elected to the federal parliament in 2016 after a couple of unsuccessful tilts for pre-selection for the Liberal National Party. So I won pre-selection in 2016, which was my 3rd time around, so 3rd time lucky. And I've been in the federal parliament ever since. And to me, it is the greatest honour of my life. I've got to do many things in my journey as an MP. I've got to do a lot with our Defence Force. I was the 31st Speaker of the House of Representatives for a very short while in the dying days of the Morrison government, which was a great honour. But more recently, I've been invited to head the Israel Allies Caucus, and I was asked to go to New York in September of this year. So I was representing the Australian Parliament at the United Nations General Assembly. So I was over there for 6 weeks. And of course, October 7 hit. Really, I think had a profound impact on me, as it did for many people. But I have, I live with Julie and Lisa in Canberra. I have always felt a strong affinity as a Christian with the Jewish people. And to see what we were witnessing on October 7, and in the US, the TV coverage on CNN was just wall-to-wall coverage of. In the early days, CNN were quite sympathetic to the Jewish people and what had happened on October 7. But it was for those of you and looking from what I can see, many of you have been around a bit longer than I have, but it reminded me of the Desert Storm 1 and Desert Storm 2. It was just wall-to-wall, 24/7 media coverage of October 7 and the attacks on Israel. And the coverage, the video footage in particular that they showed in the US was much more graphic than what we've seen here in Australia. I'm not sure whether that's a cultural decision on the part of the networks here or whether it's a regulatory sort of situation. I think the US are much more inclined to be much more graphic in their portrayal of what's happening from a violence perspective, but they're much more conservative when it comes to sexual matters, whereas I think in Australia we're the exact opposite. But I just felt very moved by that, and when I was invited to sort of re-enliven the Israel Allies Caucus, I felt that that's one thing that I could do to do my bit, however small that might be, to engender support amongst Australians and to show solidarity with our Jewish friends. Like many of you, I'm sure, I've been appalled with what has happened in Australia following October 7 with the demonstrations and the carry on of some Australian people, particularly in our education sector and the left of politics. And I think that unless, it's the old saying, evil happens when good men do nothing. I think it's incumbent upon us, irrespective of what your faith beliefs are, to stand up and say, no, we said never again, and we meant that. And I remember, I think one of the things that shaped me as a young man was reading Schindler's Ark when in Year 12, and for English, and that had a significant impact on me. And then the book was made into a movie some years later, and my wife Leonie and I went to the movies and watched what was then called Schindler's List. I think it was one way or the other, yeah. And everybody was at the end. Everybody was leaving, and I couldn't leave. I felt like someone had thrown a wet blanket over me, and I was sobbing. Mm-hmm. And I was very emotional, and to this day it sort of makes me emotional again, just how human beings could do that to fellow human beings was just beyond me. And I now, in one of my jobs in the Parliament, is I'm the Deputy Chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. So we receive briefings up to top secret level from our security and intelligence agencies on everything that's happening both domestically and abroad. And, that is a very confronting job often, but someone's got to do it. And I'm the Deputy Chair, so you've got to step up. And the Israeli ambassador offered the committee a few weeks ago a briefing and a viewing of the 43-minute compilation video of the attacks on October 7. And it's 43 minutes of my life I'll never get back. Yeah. When I was a barrister, I acted as counsel assisting the coroner in a number of deaths, and I've seen my fair share of death and carnage. But nothing could prepare me for that video. The sheer brutality and barbarity of that, of what happened by Hamas terrorists on that day. And I've said this a number of times since, that I can live psychologically with the death and carnage, but what really had a profound impact on me was watching innocent, often kids, being loaded into the back of the truck. Some were bloody, beaten, some had been maimed from grenades and bullet wounds, etc. But literally being thrown in the back of trucks like they were dogs. And those people being driven back into Gaza to the absolute cries of sheer delight, not just of the Hamas terrorists, but of the civilian population. Yeah. And I think I've found that harder to deal with. Yeah. We talk about Hamas terrorists. But and I'm not suggesting that all Palestinians are bad people. I'm not suggesting that for a second. But there was absolute delight when those innocent civilians, were brought in as hostages into Gaza. And I think that'll probably stay with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it was a terrible, and one that we don't hear about. Great, interesting, Andrew. I could ask some questions about your school life and all other things, but I won't. I'll go keep on the topic. And just to say to people that the Israel Allies Caucus is open to left and right members of Parliament. Anybody who has a heart to support Israel and its right as a nation, as they should do, can be a member. And Andrew's going to head that up, and Rabbi and I and a few others are going to be announcing next year that we as SCAFI, Southern Cross Alliance for Israel, will actually be a supporter to the Israel Allies Caucus.
Unmute, John.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, thank you. That interview went on for about another 15 or 20 minutes with questions and answers. And I'm hoping that next year we will have Andrew Wallace on and we can ask our own questions and answers at a special meeting that we'll have in the new year. So you get the heart of the man. He's now stepped up to this role, which is a new role in Parliament. Recognition as Israel Allies Caucus. So the Parliament recognises the group as against having a friendship group, which is very loosely termed. There will be an Israel Allies Caucus and be recognised by Parliament. And it is our hope that we as SCAFI and all our partners, ICJ, Christians for Israel, many of the individual churches, members, etc., will come alongside this support for our members of Parliament that support Israel. And in fact, we will be starting the Israel Allies Foundation, Oceana. I think that's the proper name, Rabbi Riesenberg. You get... So that is all happening in the new year, so that we will actually have the ability to help people in Israel, help the ministries, the parliamentarians, and in particular, you know, what I am gathering as we go through this journey, the part of educating our parliamentarians, our friends, our Christian and ministries, and our children and grandchildren is something that we have let slip as a group of people, and we need to step up. And one of the, just to give you an example of, you know, my early days in discussions with Andrew, he asked the question of whether we as a group support this two-state solution. And Josh Reinstein from ICEJ just said, well, that's not our decision as a group of supporters of Israel, because it's absolutely up to the Israel government to answer that question as to what is going to happen in that territory. But what I did get was, I said to Andrew, did you know that there have been somewhere between 5 and 9 occasions since 1948 where Israel as a nation has offered statehood for peace to the Palestinian liberation and many of its forebears. And on each occasion, it has been knocked back because there can be no peace while Jews are in the land. So he said, no, I didn't know that. And he said, I don't think many of our members of Parliament would know the history of all those things, as I didn't know as an early Christian. So I think it's up to all of us to start to educate our friends, our ministry, our children and grandchildren as to the rights of the land. And I can see that we've got our friend Hugh Kitson online. We've also got another special friend online, Stan Goodenough. I think we might have a couple of minutes for you, Stan, if you are there and you wish to say something. But Hugh Kitson and his series of Whose Land Is It? Goes through, and you can Google it on YouTube, and I think there's 10 to 12-minute sessions that give you the background and give others the background of what has actually happened during these times. And in recognition of Hugh, who's in England, he's actually a special guest on AJA on tomorrow night, talking about a few of these things. And we've had others like Andrew Tucker and many of our other friends through Think Corporation, talking about the legal structures and all those sorts of things, etc. But it's up to us to educate our friends and those that we have influence with as to the history and why, inverted commas, Israel as a nation has its rights and the position of the PLO. Anyway, Rabbi, before I pass to you to close, Stan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, John. Hi, everyone.
Be good just to have a couple of minutes to say hello to you, mate.
Thank you. Just glad to be able to stop by. And always good to know that you're doing what you're doing there, John, with SCAFI. It's good news to hear about the caucus, the Christian Allies Caucus, now having its positioning itself in Canberra there. I think that's really, really essential at this time. And obviously, as those of you who know the love I have for your country and the concern I have for the direction it's taking in relation to Israel, so that's really really good news. And of course, all strength to Andrew there. Just very briefly, it's a beautiful day here in Jerusalem. We've got rocket assaults coming in from the south towards Tel Aviv in the last few minutes, and also from the north. The temperature with the north is heating up. I think there is a growing awareness that the Gaza war is only the first step. And yesterday we heard from Israel's Benny Gantz, directed at the Secretary of State of the United States, that Israel is going to have to confront Hezbollah, and that's a whole big ball of wax to unravel. But yeah, good to know that you're doing what you're still doing down there. Greetings to you, Rabbi, as well. I've watched with concern what's been happening in and around Caulfield. I think the shock, the double whammy shock after the October 7th massacre, and then it ignited instantaneously flames of anti-Semitism as far away as Australia, was very hard to see. Yeah, that's time to all be stepping up, and you're certainly doing that down there, John, with SCAFI. So God bless all of you, and yeah, shalom from Jerusalem.
Thank you, Stan. Wonderful to see you. I'm also see a message from Hugh Kitson that he'll be on AJA tomorrow night with episode 17 of Whose Land Is It? So that will be a first. So I just encourage people to get online and join in on that. If you're not an AJA subscriber, you'll find it on Facebook or YouTube to sit in on. So a wonderful evening. Just before I pass to the Rabbi to close off, one of our friends, Joan O'Neill, and a number of other people have asked us to let you know to set the date aside for the, I'm just checking, the 28th of January. Yeah, at 4 p.m. There'll be a prayer vigil for the hostages to bring them home and against the rise of anti-Semitism. And the Jewish councils and many Christians will be gathering in Sydney to share and pray together. I will and we will share with you the place and time for that as we go through January. We will be having a rest over this period of holiday time and celebration for Christians, etc. So there'll be dates put out by Stephen together with the copies of the recording from tonight. We'll give you perhaps the first 3 months of what we're doing next year. But we're really encouraged by all of you. We invite you to keep track with us, sign on board, bring your friends. As I continue to say, Jews and Christians, not just talking together, but standing together, side by side and hand in hand. Over to you, Rabbi.
Thank you, John. Stan, how are you? Is that a yellow Star of David on your shirt?
Yes, Rabbi. It's the Never Again Is Now star that your ambassador, or that Israel's ambassador to the United Nations donned to express. Yeah, so that's what it is. Yeah.
Thank you for standing in solidarity with the Jewish people at this time. I just want to conclude. It's Hanukkah talks about the miracle of the jar of oil. So I just want to share with you and conclude with a miracle that just occurred in Gaza, not with a jar of oil, but actually a can of tuna fish in oil. On the front, when an opportunity arises, the soldiers get together to pray, to make a minyan. Minyan is for us to have a formal prayer service. We need 10 people. And it was one morning, there was a lull there in the fighting. They felt they had an opportunity they could pray, and called together those soldiers that were available. And they put on their talit, the Jewish prayer shawl, and they put on the tefillin. You've probably the black boxes and the straps which contained the Shema. And they began the morning service. Remarkably, I found out on Mondays and Tuesdays and Shabbat, we also take out a Torah. And in Gaza, many of the units have a small Torah that, when time and safety permits, actually read the Torah reading of that week. So our custom is in the morning service, 3 people are called up to make the blessing. And there was a commander there who was part of the prayer service. He asked that he should be called up to make the blessing on the Torah, but then once he'd finished the blessing and the reading, he said an additional blessing called Hagomel. It's a blessing that we say when we've experienced a miracle. And naturally enough, the soldiers turned around, and this particular lieutenant, I believe he wasn't known to be particularly religious. He says, they asked him, what happened? He said, I experienced a miracle just the other day. We were sitting there, it was a quiet moment, and we all went into our packs and got something to eat. A standard food of the Israeli army, I found out, was tuna. Tuna is not particularly delightful to eat, particularly if it's something that you have every day. So the Israeli soldiers had found a way to make it a bit more appetizing. So the tuna was in a little can, and the tuna was in oil. So what the soldiers did was they took a match, they put it in the oil lit, and therefore your basic tuna became a smoked tuna. It became half edible. So the soldier did what he always did without even thinking, takes a match, put it in the tuna, and the tuna flames up. The soldier next to him says, what are you, crazy? What are you doing? Well, there's ammunition all around of us. You could kill us. So without thinking, he takes the tuna and he throws it. He throws the can of tuna. In a few moments later, there is a massive explosion, and subsequently to that, members of the Hamas terrorist group are coming out of this hole in the ground waving a white flag. Apparently what had happened when he threw this can of tuna, that landed in a Hamas tunnel, that they were about to come out of this tunnel and attack this group of Israeli soldiers. So when he threw the can of tuna into the tunnel, their ammunition exploded. They thought they had been caught, and they came out of that tunnel, and they surrendered. So another small miracle of oil, albeit with a can of tuna. And I think this really taps into what Rabbi Freilich said, that the rabbis always emphasized the small miracles that occur, not only by Hanukkah, and I think it's a personal reflection for all of us as we go through our day-to-day lives. Not every day is perfect, as we all know. We've all got our challenges, but I think we all need to reflect in every single day. There's bound to be at least one small miracle that God has given us that we can celebrate. So God bless you all. A happy Hanukkah, Freilich and Hanukkah, and thank you all for your support. And please God, we look forward to joining you, sharing with you more good news in the coming year. John.
Blessings. Please unmute and just say good night.